We start with the main event of UFC 273
Mm.
for the featherweight title, men's featherweight that is. It's Alexander Volkanovski looks to make his third defense against the Korean Zombie, Dominic. So an interesting fight here for the Korean Zombie. This is his first attempt at fighting for a featherweight title since UFC 163, I think was the event.
Long time.
It's been a long time. This man has done a whole ass military service in between, had his comeback, and he's looked very good. He's looked like even a more complete fighter maybe as
Yes.
of late. But Dominic, the odds tell a different story. A 7-1, over
Mm.
7-1 favorite
Mm.
does most books place Alexander Volkanovski right now. Can this is a big difference from when he was fighting Brian Ortega and when he was minus 150
Hmm.
somewhere in there. Can you explain to the people why Volkanovski has been given so much of a boost this time around?
Well, one of the most underappreciated fighters in the UFC is finally starting to get some respect, it looks like, Noah, because a minus 720, I'm truly flabbergasted. Don't get me wrong, he's one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world. Korean Zombie kind of, I mean, this isn't like a short notice, but he wasn't originally going to be the title challenger, so I get all the circumstances, but I'm excited. I think this is a closer fight than most people think on paper, just because Korean Zombie has shown improvements and his well-rounded skill set is really getting sharpened. I still, it sucks that we did lose out of the prime years of Korean Zombie when he was doing his mandatory military service. But like you said, he has looked good since he's returned. He looked great in his last outing against Dan Ige for 5 rounds, and he's going to need that type of approach, that type of all-around game plan that is to come and try and take the title from Volkanovski. It's crazy. He's already going into his third title defense. He's been relatively active, man, to be honest, for Alexander. And I will say, as a guy that, you know, I struggled to give the proper props to Volk when he had those fights with, Max Holloway, one of my favorites of all time. But he beat him, right? And that's all that matters. But then he had that amazing war with Brian Ortega. And I've just grown to really appreciate the greatness of this man and how smart he is. You're not going to see many other fighters. Honestly, two of the best, like highest IQ fighters in the UFC are fighting on this card, and that includes Alexander Volkanovski. So I'm very excited to see the X's and O's and how this plays out because Noah, he's dead set on finishing the zombie.
That's easier said than done,
Yeah.
but the story for these odds, this fight, it feels like Max Holloway does cast a pretty big shadow over this fight. He was originally scheduled to be in this place against Volkanovski, pulls out with an injury, and then kind of all hell breaks loose. I mean, the pullout came about 24 hours after the fight was announced.
Yeah.
Then we hear rumors that the UFC were attempting to put Max Holloway and Josh Emmett in the main event of UFC Columbus, which happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Um, so Max Holloway is now kind of the backup fighter for this, or I don't know if he's officially the backup fighter, but he said he's, ready, and
Yeah.
if anything happens. Kind of weird that
Mm.
and I'm sure that for some people they would love if the UFC would come in and be like, okay, zombie, thank you, but all right, we're gonna do the trilogy now.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can see yourself out, but obviously they're not going to do that. So I think for a lot of people, there's just this inevitability to this fight. Alexander Volkanovski has passed every test. Don't get me wrong, there's still unfinished business with Max Holloway, but this run he's been on has been really something to behold. I mean, you're talking about some of the most durable fighters in UFC history that he's gone up against. You go back to even before he won the title. He probably, outside of Peter Yan, which was at bantamweight, he was probably the most okay, let me just say it. He so decisively beat Jose Aldo, a fight that a lot of people don't even remember anymore. It was Aldo's last fight at featherweight.
Hmm.
It was 30-27s across the board. Volkanovski was just that was where that puzzling factor where it's like, oh my God, how can you beat this guy? Like, he just
Yeah.
has so many things he throws at you that he forces you to focus on, but you can't focus on, five different things at once. I know Aldo, he got knocked out by McGregor and Holloway, but it was just such a decisive win that it was like, okay, this guy might be for real. But then to go in at UFC 245 and beat Max Holloway, who was really making a case to be the best featherweight of all time. And I don't think there's an argument to be made for the first fight, personally. I think
No.
Volkanovski clearly won that fight. Not by any means a blowout, close fight. But if someone tells me that Max Holloway won that fight, I think that they just haven't watched it in a long time and
Yeah.
are probably a Max Holloway fan. Second fight, different story. Still very close. Not a robbery. But me and you both scored it for Max live, I would say.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it since. If I did, maybe I'd feel differently. It's that third round is always where
That's the
where
one.
the tide turned. Max started out strong, dropped Volkanovski twice.
Yeah, in
once.
each round. Yep.
While Volkanovski came on strong late, it's that round 3 where the tide began to turn. You don't really know who you give that round to, but Volkanovski, again, edges him out on the scorecards. Then, and that's Max Holloway, who, again, has absorbed, I believe, the most significant strikes in UFC history without being dropped one time in his career. Follows that up with Brian Ortega, who we know what a warrior that guy is. That guy gets hit. He takes damage, but boy, does he find a way to survive. And that was my fight of the year. Volkanovski Ortega. It was an ass whooping for the most of it. Volkanovski looked phenomenal. This is the fight that earned him the respect that put these odds so lopsided in his favor.
Yep.
He looked like the best fighter I've maybe ever seen this night. It's kind of like how I felt about Max when he fought Calvin Kattar.
Right. It was one of those big time performances.
But it wasn't like it wasn't danger free. Ortega locks on 2 different deep submissions in round 3. Hail Mary submissions in a way. And then Volkanovski able to fight his way out of both of them.
No one else gets out of that guillotine.
The story that fight tells is just like masterpiece.
Yes.
But it was mostly a one-sided beating for Volkanovski. So once again, this guy just earning that respect. And now he follows that up with the Korean Zombie, who, just to be clear, has that nickname for a reason.
Yeah.
Not just because no matter how many times he gets hit, he keeps moving forward, but it's because it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to kill a zombie, and the Korean Zombie has not been finished many times in his career. We all know about the amazing 5-round main event with Yair Rodriguez, the last second spinning elbow. Awesome stuff, but Korean Zombie, normally, that dude, you cannot put him away. That's kind of the battle here for me. Volkanovski, it seems like he thrives in these 5-round wars because normally he's the one, what they say, swinging the hammer.
Yeah.
He's the one kind of testing his opponent's durability.
Yeah.
He's yet to really be tested as far as his durability. Don't get me wrong. He's a tough-ass dude. He's, again, those submissions in the Ortega fight. The fight through those was... I thought one of those was at least going to end it. I really did. But he's still here. And for the most part, it's been clean. These 5-round fights with guys like Holloway, Ortega, and he's come out mostly unscathed.
Yeah.
Can he do that with the Korean Zombie too? Because if he does, Dominic, I think this fight is with a win here, and if he does it in decisive fashion, maybe even exciting fashion, we got to start talking about him as potentially the best featherweight of all time.
Oh yeah.
We just, it feels like when we started this podcast, we still weren't over having that discussion with Max Holloway versus Jose Aldo. Volkanovski's beat them both, and obviously, again, still unfinished business with Max, but he's getting the respect now. Obviously, the odds tell you that. Now it's time for legacy respect. Volkanovski might be nearing top 10 all time.
Yeah, very true. If I'm not mistaken, Max Holloway currently holds the most win streak at featherweight. I think it was 13 or 14. Volkanovski's 10-0 in the UFC, all at 145, and he's on a 20-fight win streak in general. This guy is sick. He's unreal. His well-roundedness, his fight IQ, second to none, and that's what makes him special. So I like that he's getting the respect he deserves. If he does go out there and beat Zombie over the course of 5 rounds, if he finishes Zombie, we're talking. We're talking right behind Kamaru Usman. We're starting a race, for
Mhm.
pound, best fighter in the world. We really are.
Yeah, I really think I honestly think there's an argument to be made that he's already number two in the UFC pound for pound
Yeah,
behind Usman, but I would actually think above Adesanya.
right.
But man, a win here, a decisive one at that, could really do a lot for his legacy. And I mean, if he were to finish the Korean Zombie, I mean, a cherry on top for sure. And then before we move on, Dominic, I do just want to kind of wrap this thing up a little bit, talk about the Korean Zombie a little bit. Obviously, he wasn't the original guy pegged to be in the spot, but since he's here, what does he have to do, in your mind, in your opinion, to find a way to get the win over Volkanovski?
I don't know. I'd like to say make Volk fight off of his back foot because Volk's constantly pressuring guys and always coming forward, and that's what Zombie's known to do as well. So it's like we're gonna meet in the middle. Someone's got to waver. Someone's got to go backwards. And you know, dude, if Korean Zombie can pull off this win, we've had a lot of feel good title victories lately, especially last year. Man, what a story that would be for the Korean Zombie after all he's went through. Fought for the title many moons ago, and now he's back again in a fight he wasn't even supposed to get, but I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be here. So there's big storylines to be had on both sides of the thing, man. What do you think, like in terms of can Zombie do this, and if so, how do you think he can do it?
So, I was a big believer in the Korean Zombie as a potential title holder in the lead up to his fight with Brian Ortega.
Yes,
That loss to Ortega hurt my the way I the it hurt my view of the Korean Zombie. I felt like, well, probably not seeing the best of him anymore. Like that just felt it was a deflating performance. It wasn't what we were used to seeing from him. And don't get me wrong, Brian Ortega was an
yeah,
absolute
it was
beast
a
in that fight. Um, but it just wasn't. It just didn't look like the best Korean Zombie that we had been seeing up to that point. But his win over Dan Ige, again, not the most exciting fight in the world, which, for TKZ, that's not the norm. But he did what he had to do to win in that fight. Dan Ige, a scrapper, a guy with big power in his hands. And Korean Zombie beat him not necessarily with the pressure, not with the fist, but he just had a very well rounded game plan.
grappled. Yep.
And I'm pretty sure when we talked about that fight, I think in my head I kind of went, well, I think Ige might be the more well-rounded guy coming in here.
Yeah.
And TKZ just showed that was not the case. That he's still adding new wrinkles to his game, even at the age of I believe he's 35 or 34 at this point.
Yep.
I think in order for him to have a legitimate shot at winning, there's got to be some sort of weakness to Volkanovski's game that we've yet to find, and that's
Good luck finding it.
yeah. I mean, maybe that tells you where I'm leaning. Obviously, I'm leaning with the champion here, but I mean, what if Korean Zombie is going to be the larger man of the two? He's going to have a certain size advantage.
Yeah.
Is there opportunities for him to get takedowns? Is there, like you said, fighting off the back foot? If he's the one being pressured, how does he do with that? Also, like I kept saying, despite the fact that he's been in all these 5 round wars, the war part comes from just how much his opponents are absorbing.
Yeah.
Like he's not really taking a lot of punishment. So if the Korean Zombie can land anything significant, of a very powerful head kick or some combination that really wobbles Volkanovski, how does Alexander do when he has to really dig deep?
Yes.
We've seen it with the submissions. Here, I just want to see it.
Elsewhere.
Can he get hurt on the feet? How can he survive that?
Yeah.
So, I think there's definitely a way for Korean Zombie to shock the world here. But even though I don't necessarily agree with the odds being this much stacked in Volk's favor, a Korean Zombie win would definitely be a shock to the world, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree.